Great.
Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's workshop, Maximizing the Power of Your Pitch. This workshop is hosted by Life Science Nation. My name is Candice He. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at LSN, and I'm also the Global Investment Strategist. Here at LSN, my team is in charge of building relationships with startups, tech hubs, and also service providers to help them connect with their targets. Today, I'm also joined by my colleague, Claire. So Claire, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So thank you, Candice, for kicking this off. So my name is Claire. I am the VP of Investor Research at Life Science Nation. So at Life Science Nation, the role of the investor research team is to manage all investor relations for LSN. And we also are responsible for managing and curating an investor database of investors that are active in the life science and healthcare industries with a focus on early stage investments. And yeah, so I also manage BD in South Korea and Japan, and I am actually currently based in South Korea, though most of our colleagues at LSN are based in Boston, and we have our offices in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So I hope everyone here finds this session informative and looking forward to a great session.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks for joining me at 2 a.m. of your time.
It's actually 3 a.m.
Already. Yeah, thank you. So for today, our agenda for this workshop will be, we have 4 parts. First of all, I wanted to give everyone a quick overview of who Life Science Nation is. And then I will review the format of our upcoming Resi Innovators Pitch Challenge. After that, Claire will share some tips on how to build your pitch materials, what makes a good presentation. And lastly, we are going to share some tips on how to prepare for the investor questions during a pitch session.
I just wanted to quickly mention that there is a Q&A feature in the Zoom menu bar in the bottom of your screen. So if you do have any questions, we will try to address them throughout the session.
Yes. Good point. Also, most of the information about Resi can be found on our website, resiconference.com, but we will share the presentation slides of today's workshop via a follow-up email that will be sent out tomorrow. Yeah, so just a quick overview of Life Science Nation. LSN is founded 10 years ago in Boston. We started as a database company. We have 2 databases. One is called LSN Investor Database that tracking over 10,000 investor contacts, representing over 2,500 investment firms. And the way we collect the data, Claire's team, the investor research team, they collect data is through a very unique method. We conduct interviews with the investors, and we ask them about their requirements and preferences when they're doing investments, including their allocation information, their sector, subsector of interest, what is their requirements for the management team, etc. And we put all of those into a writing format, and we post them as the investor profile into the database. And it will also include the investor contacts. We also have a database called the LSN Business Development Database, which includes the profile of over 60,000 life science companies. So that is our first platform. The second platform is called Redefining Early Stage Investment Conference, Resi. This is actually the most famous product or platform because Resi is now the biggest conference focused on early stage life science partnering. And it is connected to our investor database. So every time when they invite an investor to attend Resi, we will ask them whether he can provide any updates on his profile or new mandates. And then they will import their investor profile from the database to the conference. So for the startups who looks to fundraising, it is very helpful because they can just apply some filters to see which investors will be the best fit for them. Partnering is the biggest component of Resi, but we also have investor panels, we have entrepreneur workshops, and it's a 3-day conference. So a lot of the content, a lot of the opportunities for companies to make connections here. They host the Resi conference 5 times every year. The upcoming one will be in September in our hometown, Boston. So September 21st through 22nd, we are going to host our first on-site Resi since pandemic in Westin Copley Place, Boston. And on top of that, we also provide consulting services for startups who need help on building their pitch deck, exit summary, logo, tagline. So basically, we wanted to make sure we can help you to build a your branding or messaging, which is more customized for investor meetings. And then they also provide the entrepreneur education courses, free workshops like this one today, to help the first-time entrepreneurs to learn more about the fundraising 101, how to interact with investors. Yeah. So here I wanted to share some tips on how to how to select the right conference to attend, not necessarily Resi or our pitch event, but generally all events, because there are different event types. There are conventions focused more on the exhibition. You can showcase your product, your prototype, etc. There are some conferences focused more on the information. So it's a lot of the panels, and most of the time you will be the audience. There are also networking events where you can meet people randomly, having conversation with each other. But if you are fundraising, then I think the best choice for you is to attend partnering conference. And when you are trying to research whether a partnering conference is a good fit for you or not, pay more attention to the audience, like who are the attendees. It might be a big conference, but if you're fundraising, the most important thing is not the total attending numbers, but how many target investors for you are attending this conference. So at Life Science Nation, we are tracking 10 different categories of the investors, not only the angels or VCs, but also corporate venture capital, family offices, private health, hedge funds, large pharma, big medtech who are interested in licensing deals, co-development. We all think they are very important players in the early stage fundraising arena. So here we have some examples of the formal investor attendees at Resi, or those ones are in our database. As you guys can see, it's very diverse. We have some small funds and also the big pharmas, the international incubators, the ones from Asia, Europe. Yeah, so we truly recommend all the entrepreneurs to do not limit yourself to the domestic area. If you are fundraising and the investors, no matter where they're located, as long as they have the currency, the fund in the currency that you want, then they can invest in you. So definitely do not limit yourself and look into the global platform. Yeah. And here is a quick overview of our upcoming Resi conference. So as I mentioned, this will be our first on-site one since the pandemic. So we have a lot of exciting updates for the format. So this time, Resi is going to be 3 days. The first 2 days will be on-site in Boston. We will have on-site partnering, on-site investor panels, workshops, and most importantly, the Innovators Pitch Challenge. And the third day will be the virtual plenary. So just in case you cannot attend in person, you can still connect with other Resi attendees. So on the right, we have a quick chart to demonstrate the Resi attendee demographic. Basically, we have a one-on-one ratio between the investors and the startups. And we also will have normally have dozens of service providers attending the conference too. They might be specialized in the filing the IP for you, or help you to make the transaction happen, or they might be your future CRO, CDMO partners. For the upcoming Resi, they are expecting over 350 investor attendees, and also over 200 startups to attend. Normally, we will have attendees from over 40 different countries. So it will be a truly international global event. Here is a quick overview of the Resi Boston agenda. They have a very strong focus on the early stage life science investments. So in our definition, the life science can be divided into 4D. We think it's drugs or therapeutics, devices or medtech, diagnostics, and also digital health. Also in our definition, the early stage will be anywhere from seed round to Series B round. So if you are raising under $50 million and you're looking for partners, this will be a red fit for you. So moving to the most popular track is the Innovators Pitch Challenge. At the upcoming Resi, they are going to have a 14 IPC or Innovators Pitch Challenge sessions. Here we have some examples of the finalists of our last conferences. So as I mentioned, if you are working on the 4Ds or R&D service startups, if you are raising seed round, which is at $25K to $2 million, Series A usually is $2 million to $10 million, or Series B $10 to $15 million, then this will be a red fit for you to pitch your technology to hundreds of the investors. And attending the IPC will really increase your visibility. And because we have a different channels to market your technology and your company for you. If you become a IPC finalist, then your logo will be featured on the Resi website, on the Resi conference live agenda. And also, as a finalist or the winner, you will be announced at LSN newsletter. So this newsletter, we have over 50,000 readers in our community. So this will hugely increase your visibility to the Resi community. Then you can also build connections with the Ipc Investor Judges. All the pitch sessions, they are open to the registered attendees. So normally you can expect 20 to 30 at least investors sitting in the audience, and many of them are very likely to contact you if they're interested after the pitch session. So that can really attract the investors to contact you. And then the last benefit will be we are going to select 3 top winners at the last day of the conference. And they will be announced at the closing networking reception, and we are going to give them free Resi tickets as a reward. So for the on-site Resi, we made a lot of updates and improvements, and we have different ways to help our attendees, participants to showcase their technology. The first one is the Ipc Poster. So the one, we have an example at the right. So basically we will have a poster board for you, and we will share the template on the website. But basically, you will have your elevator pitch, you will have your logo, a quick summary of what is your technology is about, what is the problem you are trying to solve, and then a quick overview of your management team and contact information. So this poster board will be placed in the Resi exhibition hall, where have a very high traffic. So basically all the Resi attendees, they're walking by the exhibition hall and they will see your poster board of your technology. And if they like your technology, they can actually vote for you, because all the Resi attendees, when they are checking in, we are going to give them 5 Resi cash, the one I showcased at the bottom. So this serves as the vote for IPC. Everyone can vote for top 5 companies they like, and for the IPC company who collect the most of the votes will be the winner of the IPC. Yeah, next one, another channel to showcase your company at Resi is our pitch and Q&A session. So the format is we're going to have 4 companies per session, and we're going to group the companies based on the similar sector or technology. For example, session 1 is 4 companies working on therapeutics. Session 2 is a medical device, etc. And then for each session, we're going to have you do a 4-minute pitch presentation with your slides. And as I mentioned, it is open to all Resi attendees. So you can expect a lot of the investors sitting in the audience and hear your pitch. Then you're going to have a 9 to 10 minutes live Q&A session with a panel of the investor judges. Usually it's a 5 to 7 investor judges, and they are all expert of that sector. And after the session, we are going to connect you with all the investor judges, so you know how to follow up with them. Lastly, after the conference, the following week, we are going to send out a Resi live agenda. We'll host all the recordings of the panels, workshops, your IPC Q&A session, and also it will have a dedicated page for your company. On this page, we are going to showcase your company description, your pitch deck, Excel summary, and most importantly, your contact information. So for the attendees who cannot attend on site, they still have a chance to review your materials and request a one-on-one meeting with you. We also have some space for the optional materials. So if you want, we can post your 4-minute pitch video, a pre-recorded one. You can just record it on Zoom. And you can include some detailed image or a demo of your product. And also, if you have one, you can include some OTM testimonials too. Yeah, lastly, I wanted to remind everyone the deadline to apply for the Innovators Pitch Challenge for Resi Boston is August 12th. And the application really won't take you more than 5 minutes. This is all the questions we are going to ask you for the application. Basically, we want to make sure we understand which is a sector, subsector you belong to, what is your indication focus, what is your stage of development. And we ask you to upload your logo, pitch deck, and Excel summary so we can build your dedicated web page. And at the bottom of the application is a payment section. So the price for the IPC package is $24.95, basically $2,500. And that also includes the registration. So it's not only the pitch fee, but it's a package already included your 3-day registration fee. And all those links are available on the Resi website. If you visit the Innovators Pitch Challenge button, you will see it. And then next part, Claire is going to share some tips on how to build a good presentation. Claire, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Yeah, so thanks, Candace, for the great overview on LSN and IPC. So I think the general takeaway is that we really do try to have all of these components, including not just the pitch, but also being able to engage actively with a panel of investor judges and also having a poster presentation. So I'm not sure how many people in the audience are familiar with how Resi used to be pre-COVID, but we basically kind of merged all of these different components and really trying to make the best experience for companies who are interested in pitching and really wanting to increase their exposure to all of the conference attendees, which, as Candace explained, we do have a great portion of investors who will be joining the conference. So yeah, so with the rest of the presentation, I do want to go over some tips on making a good presentation, and this will be applicable to not just your pitch, but also your marketing collateral as well. And we will also go over some questions that investors might ask when you are engaged in a pitch session, not necessarily at Resi. So just to start with a quick overview here, of course, the science and technology is kind of the bread and butter. It really makes up for what the core of your company, but you don't just want to focus on the science or the technology. You want to focus on different aspects of your company and what other components make your company ready for investment. So this also, of course, with regards to your science and or technology, you want to be able to make sure that you showcase that you are addressing a high unmet medical need and the way that you're approaching a certain problem or problems is differentiable and is novel. You also want to cover different strengths of your company, including a broad IP position, if applicable, any positive data you've accumulated thus far, any highlights or strengths of your management team or advisors, any key strategic alliances you have with major partners, and this could be depending on company type. It could be a large pharma, med tech, any manufacturing and clinical partners, pilots, etc. And then also, of course, this one with the context of IPC in mind. So Candace mentioned that all of the participating companies will have a dedicated landing page. So by default with our application, we do collect all of the slide decks and executive summaries that you have for your company. And a lot of these, and these marketing collateral will be reviewed by our investor judges who will be in the session for your pitch. So you want to be able to show them investor-ready marketing material. So that's compelling and not too long, and we'll go over the specifics in the next couple of slides. Okay, so the first messaging tip that we want to start off with is clearly describing your technology. I think this is definitely easier said than done, but basically the takeaway here is being able to, especially when you're thinking about being in a pitch session, you're usually going to be having limited time to explain what your company is doing and being holistic with the overview of your company. So you want to be able to, with the limited amount of time, to be really maximizing them and budgeting your time wisely. So you want to avoid vague statements, especially when you're describing what your company is doing. So this is a pretty general example here, but instead of saying something like, my company has a proprietary treatment for many critical illnesses, you really do want to get to the specifics of what you're doing, what you're targeting, and how you're targeting. So it would be clear to say something like, we are developing an IND-ready small molecule asset for breast cancer by activating natural killer cells. So in that sentence, it's actually not too longer than the first example that I just read out, but in that sentence, you already have a good idea of what the modality is, what target indication is, and then also the general mechanism of action or the approach. So being able to be as specific as possible, but not being too specific. And also be realistic with all of the statements that you say. And something that we commonly see is companies saying really bold statements like, we are transformational and we have no direct competitors, which really might be true. But if you are going to say some really bold statements like that, you really do want to be able to back that up with some substantial follow-on statements. So with that context, definitely it's important to show that you know the competitive landscape. So you know what kind of companies are in your space, even though they won't be direct competitors, because their technology will definitely be slightly different. So just being able to be realistic with those statements and highlight how your technology stands out from the existing competitors is going to be very compelling when you talk about your company. Okay. And then explaining where your company currently is at in terms of like company status in detail is also going to be important. So again, just echoing what I said earlier with the previous slide, you want to avoid vague statements. You want to be able to get the investors or whoever you're pitching to get them to understand where your company is currently at and what your company needs to further move along and grow the company. So outline the current status, but don't be vague about it. If you have any key milestones that you know you want to accomplish, then have a rough timeline in mind. I know most of the companies here might have something like a Gantt chart in their slide deck, so sort of a development time frame. But when you're doing a pitch, you might not necessarily have slides or so in that case, you want to at least be able to say some key statements about where you currently are and what the next strategic direction is. So when you're talking about the management team, for example, you don't want to say something like CEO is an experienced entrepreneur. That's not sufficient. So you want to be able to show the details of why the CEO is an experienced entrepreneur. So you want to back that up with some key details like how long has the relevant experience been, how many companies have they exited, if there are any notable companies that the CEO has worked with. Those are the kinds of details that you want to cover when you're talking about these kinds of things. Okay. And then summarizing near-term and long-term strategies. So this is kind of similar to what I was saying earlier, but understanding where you currently are and what steps you need to take, what kind of funding you need, what kind of partnerships you need to accomplish or achieve the key milestones that you have in mind for your company. And also, of course, understanding what those milestones even are. You also want to be able to summarize the key strategic relationships that you have ongoing. And if you don't have those kinds of strategic partnerships, showing why you need these kinds of partnerships and what kind of partnerships you're looking for. So assuming that you do have these partnerships in mind, you want to talk about, depending on the type of your company, it could be again, like a large pharma, large med tech, it could be a pilot, somewhere where you're doing a pilot study, and so on. So those kinds of details. And then also, I know I mentioned in the overview about IP protection. So intellectual property is going to be important because investors do want to invest in companies that are de-risked and want to make sure that they are investing in proprietary technologies that is well protected. So in a lot of cases, companies will have patents filed or may already have a pretty broad global portfolio. But in any case, whatever the situation is, those are also the details that you want to cover. And so being able to provide somewhat of a detailed strategy that you have in mind to move the company to the next stages of development is very important. And then with regards to the marketing collateral and just in relation to the application that we have, so we do have a field for adding a company description. So with this, we really don't want the companies to go overboard. We do see company applications where companies add a chock full of information about their company and getting too specific, but you really want to provide, I think a paragraph or two really is sufficient to talk about your company, because you don't have to talk about all aspects of your company. So because our application does require a slide deck and executive summary, and those will be part of all of the dedicated landing pages that each company will have as part of Resi and IPC participation, those are more of the detailed marketing collateral that should complete the application, and kind of it serves as an extension of the 1 or 2 paragraphs that you add for the company description. And investors will definitely not take a close look if they are looking at a slide deck that is over, say, like 30 slides long. And unfortunately, we do run into those kinds of really long marketing collateral, and that length is not necessary for an intro slide deck or introductory executive summary. Yep. So with regards to the 4-minute presentation, so going back to the format of our pitch and Q&A session, so all of the companies will be assigned to a session based on the sectors or category that they are in. And each session will have 4 companies, and all of the companies will have time for a 4-minute presentation, followed by roughly 10 minutes of Q&A. So with that format in mind, just as a quick review, a 4-minute presentation is definitely very short. I would say covering every single details about your company will be very difficult to do. And this is by no means the list that you absolutely have to go by, but this is what we highly recommend to have it as all the components that you need and should have in a 4-minute presentation. So highlighting, of course, what you're doing, so a kind of a technology overview and the unmet need that you're targeting, just echoing some of the things that has been said earlier, the key differentiation that your company has, and especially the competitive landscape and how you stand out from other companies that are in the space, any key milestones that you've achieved. And then from there on, that's already going to take up a good chunk of the 4 minutes. So we think it's, in most cases, it is unlikely to be able to talk about the management team, the KOLs, like funding to date, and then the addressable market all in 4 minutes. So we really want all of the companies to think about what really is the key highlight or like key strength that you want to highlight. So it could be the management team, especially if the management team and or advisory board has a lot of relevant experience in this space. Or it could be that, for example, the market that you're targeting might be a little bit niche. It might not be something as straightforward as, say, like cancer, diabetes. So, what a lot of companies don't always understand is that investors are not always going to be familiar with the market that you're in, which means you really need to prove that you are the expert. So in those cases, you might want to highlight the market that you're addressing a bit more. So whatever it is, just depending on your situation and just budgeting your time, we strongly recommend that you choose kind of 1 or 2 central themes to focus, and then that should already take up a good amount of the 4 minutes, if not going over. So keep that in mind. And we also have an optional video component. So in our previous Resis, we actually required all of the pitch videos for all of the participating companies, but now this is optional because all of the companies will be delivering a 4-minute pitch in person. But I guess if you want to submit a video, you're more than welcome to do so. And the screenshot in the right is kind of an example here where the person has their video somewhere in the corner and they're just going through the slides. So this can be useful for cases where not everyone who is interested is going to be able to join the pitch and Q&A session at the Resi conference. So if you want to make sure that as many people as possible are reviewing your materials in some sort of degree, then it's definitely highly recommended to have this pitch video prepared. And also what is nice about it is for those of you who don't have much pitching experience, preparing and making this video can also serve as a really good practice for when you're doing the actual pitch at the conference or any other conferences for that matter. So just jumping into the potential investor questions here, and this is really going to, some of them have already been said, so I will try my best to not repeat myself and sound too repetitive. But with a 4-minute pitch, essentially you are going to cover the general aspects. But as I mentioned, because 4 minutes is a relatively short amount of time, there might be some material, some topics that you weren't able to cover. And while we do ask all of the investor judges to review the slide deck and executive summary, all of the marketing collateral that you submit in advance, some of the investors might not be familiar, or they might not have paid attention to some of the slides properly. So the questions can be general, but we oftentimes, most of the time we do see that the questions do get quite specific. So with regards to technology, for example, if you didn't really cover the market too much, or if they're not familiar with the product, they might delve into more of, like, say, they might be talking more about the business. They might want to know more about the business model, how exactly the technology works. They might ask something about like reimbursement strategy, and so on. They might also ask more specific information about the data and what kind of data you've been seeing, because you might not have covered all of the data that you've seen. So they might ask for more if they're we do have on occasion investors who are familiar with the particular space, in which case the questions on the data can become more granular. Also, investors, of course, really like to see the potential of the technology being applicable in multiple market segments. So if that is the case, they might ask for those kinds of informations as well. So the platform potential. So that's also a pretty commonly asked question, like, will this technology have applications in other markets? And then also with regards to market and competition, if the I also touched upon this a little bit earlier, but if they are not too familiar with the market and that wasn't really covered too much in the pitch, they might ask more for like the specific market size, especially like they might be curious about how the market is in other geographies outside of the geography that you're in, for example, because everyone is looking for those with global potential. Also like barriers to entry or like regulatory challenges that you might be facing if you haven't gone through those hurdles already. And then competitive landscape. We've seen investors ask about specific companies in the past. That might not always be the case, but if competitive landscape is not discussed in your pitch, that's definitely a commonly asked question. And then I guess I just mentioned this earlier, but regulatory and reimbursement strategy. So that's also a very commonly asked question, because the investors want to know about the hurdles that the company needs to go through, and they want to make sure that that information is covered, because that's also part of kind of the de-risking thought process. Also, future fundraising plans. So a lot of companies actually forget to specify this in their pitch. So for example, if you're currently raising for a 10 million Series A, but you didn't really specify the number, then that might be part of the question. Or if you did say or specify a certain number, as an example, 10 million again, they might ask more specific use of how those funds will be allocated. And then also exit strategy is a commonly asked question as well. And then about management teams, so they might ask more specific questions about certain people in the management team, or experience or relevant experience that certain members of the management team has. And then in a lot of cases, more than you think, there are companies with an incomplete management team. They might not really have a full advisory board in place, or not so much about KOLs, in which case those are the questions that might be asked as well. So an investor might ask, like, what kind of people are you engaging with as advisors or key opinion leaders? And so they want to learn more about the management team, because ultimately the science and technology is important, but they're also working with people. So they want to get to understand the people better too. So those are also, so questions related to the management team are also pretty commonly asked. So that pretty much covers it. So with the IPC, we really do think we provide a huge value to all of the participating companies. And our team, the investor research team, has a great relationship with a lot of the early stage life science investors and strategic partners. So we really try to assemble a panel of those that are really active in a particular sector. So Candace has mentioned, and we mentioned, that we group all of these companies based on sector or technology. And we really want the companies to get great constructive feedback and questions, so that when the companies are actually in a setting where they are discussing like serious investment, and that could also come out of our IPC as well. I've heard from several investors that I have good relationships with, that after they participated in the IPC as an investor judge, they had really great follow-up meetings with the participating companies. So really, these investors are here not just to help you, not because they just like to be a judge, but they're really interested and genuinely interested in learning more about your company and technology. So with that in mind, I hope for those of you who are interested, definitely consider applying for the IPC. The deadline is next month, August 12th. And yeah, I will also let Candace share some closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Thanks for sharing all those great points based on the feedback we got from the investors. I wanted to jump out of the technicals for a second and ask everyone a question. So what is the purpose of the pitch? So what are you expecting? What is the next step? What is the outcome you wanted to see after a pitch? Are you expecting the investors to write you a big check on site? Because I have been with LSN for 3 years and I have never seen that happen. So if you have that experience, please do share me. I'm very curious to learn about your story. So the pitch, the purpose of the pitch, we always think it is to attract you a investor meeting. So what you wanted to do is really share the basics of your company so the investors can understand whether you are a fit or not. I got a lot of the feedback from my clients saying that, hey, Candace, I really love Resi conference because the fact that you have so many comprehensive investor profiles, and I can just click on some filters of the sector interest, phase of development, what is a round they really you really invested into, and I can find the target investors of mine. So the investors, they actually wanted to do the same. They wanted to quickly identify the fit. So keep that in mind when you are building your materials, especially your pitch deck. It is I have experienced a few cases like that. I think it's a common misunderstanding that the entrepreneurs think they need to feel like a lot of the information in their pitch deck, especially the ones who just came out of the tech transfer. They are transforming from the academia to the business. And I have seen pitch decks includes like 20, 30 pages, and half of them are covering a lot of the data, a lot of the charts. But after that overwhelmingly long presentation, the investors still don't have a clue. Like, so what is your application? What is a market size that you are targeting? Do you have any fundraising timeline? How you are going to spend the investment? So, so when you are building your pitch deck, make sure you cover the basic, but you don't have to go too deep into the details and the data, because it is a first pitch and you supposed to have a next, second round, third round of the investor meetings if they're interested. So this is really just serving as a teaser to attract the investors, to make sure they know, okay, you are a fit and I wanted to learn more. Yeah, I just wanted to share that feedback I usually got from my clients, and wanted to remind everyone, whenever you are building your materials or you are filling out your conference profiles, yeah, keep those key points in mind.
So thanks for that, Candace. I just wanted to address a question that the audience had. So I was going to initially type this while you were speaking, but I think it's an important point that everyone should know, and it's a great question. So I'll just read it out loud. So under current market / macro environment, I hear investors either holding back on new investments, so super cautious, or offering very low valuations. And do we agree? So Candace, you can feel free to add to this, but just to start off here, I have heard that, and I think everyone is aware of the environment right now, especially compared to last year and previous years. Especially speaking of the public sector, it is much more, it's stale, and it's definitely, the investment ecosystem doesn't seem like it used to be. But what our business, and I actually talked to this with some of the investors that I work with and have good relationships with, but they're definitely not holding back on investments. And given that a lot of the investors that we work with are in early stage and they invest primarily in privately owned companies, we haven't really, they definitely did not say that they're slowing down on investments or looking at companies more selectively. And especially with the way we've been seeing registrations go for our upcoming event, we're still expecting over 300 investors. And that includes both like those who will be attending in person and virtually, but the investors that we've been engaging with that are in the early stage definitely isn't holding back on it. So I think it definitely affects more of the investors that go beyond the typical investors or the investment stages that we are engaged with. So I guess hopefully that's good news, but I wouldn't say it's just good news only, because for the companies who have the sort of the initial rounds of financing, I know a lot of the companies are facing some difficulty getting follow-on financing and getting their, for example, like Series C and beyond. So yeah, I don't know if you want to add to that, Candace.
Yeah, sure. So I think the primary market is very different from the like the stock market, even though we're seeing a lot of the bad news on the stock market. It not necessarily will have a huge impact on the early stage investments, because during the current situation, it is likely that your valuation will be lower, and that's only the good news for investors. And I think our the attendance of Resi can also speak for itself. The number of the investor meetings, the number of the investor attendees, we did not see a huge decrease. Yeah.
Great, thanks. So I don't see any other questions from the audience. So I think we basically covered all of the essentials. So just as a reminder, again, we will be sharing these slides as a follow-up. So hopefully these can serve as a useful reference for when you're preparing for a pitch at Resi or really just anywhere else, because ultimately these are all tips that are applicable to your pitch and beyond when you're engaging with investors and perfecting your message. So
Yeah, feel free to follow us on the LinkedIn and Twitter. And if you have any questions regarding Resi or Life Science Nation at all, please feel free to contact us at resi@lifesciencenation.com. And thanks everyone for your time. Hope you have a great one. Bye, guys.